You close the door, you flip the lock, and for a few minutes, maybe the only few minutes in your entire day, you are completely, totally alone. No notifications, no voices, no one watching, just you. It feels like the most natural thing in the world. But here's what no one ever tells you. That lock, that small ordinary act of locking yourself away from other people, is one of the most radical things a human being can do. And for 99% of human history, it didn't exist. Privacy. We treat it like a basic human right, something wired into us, something ancient and instinctive. But what if it isn't? What if privacy, real, physical, guaranteed privacy, is actually one of the newest inventions in human history? What if for tens of thousands of years, human beings lived their entire lives, never once being alone? Historian Witold Rybczynski, in his landmark 1986 book, Home: A Short History of an Idea, made a claim that stunned many readers. He argued that the idea of private space inside a home, a room that belongs to you, that others must be invited into, only emerged in Western Europe in the late 1500s. Not the ancient world, not medieval times, but the 1500s, which means that for roughly 300,000 years of human existence, the concept of a private room simply did not exist for most people on Earth. So what did exist? Let's go back, much further back. Picture a camp of early Homo sapiens, somewhere in Africa, around 70,000 years ago. It is evening, the fire is lit. You are living in a band of roughly 25 to 50 people. You sleep in a cluster, bodies close enough to share warmth, close enough to hear each other breathe. You hunt together, eat together, grieve together. There is no concept of my space. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, famous for his theory that human brains evolved to track the social lives of about 150 people, argues that early humans were intensely social by biological necessity. In his research, Dunbar found that isolation wasn't just uncomfortable for early humans. It was dangerous. The group was your immune system, your food supply, your defense against predators. To be alone was, to be vulnerable. To be alone was, in the most literal sense, a threat to survival. Archaeologist Iain Davidson has spent decades studying the cave art of our ancestors. The paintings in places like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, some of them over 40,000 years old. What strikes him isn't just the art, it's the location. Many of these paintings were made deep inside caves, in chambers so narrow, so dark, so difficult to reach, that you would have needed a torch and sheer determination to get there. These were not public spaces. These were places you went alone, or in very small groups. Could these deep cave chambers have been early humanity's first attempt at privacy? We can't know for certain, but Davidson and others have suggested that the act of going deep into the earth, away from the camp, away from the fire, away from the noise, may have been one of the earliest forms of deliberate solitude. And that distinction, choosing to be alone, may be the very beginning of what we call privacy. But the real transformation didn't come until humans stopped moving. Around 10,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution changed everything. Humans settled down. They built villages, then towns, then cities, and for the first time they had walls. But here's the twist. The walls weren't built for privacy, they were built for storage. Archaeologist Ian Hodder, who spent over 2 decades excavating Çatalhöyük, one of the world's oldest towns in what is now Turkey, found something remarkable. The houses were packed tightly together, with no streets between them. People entered their homes through holes in the roof, and inside those homes, the dead were buried beneath the floor. In Çatalhöyük, Hodder's team found that multiple generations of families lived, ate, slept. There were no internal divisions. The wall kept the outside out. But inside, there was no privacy at all. In ancient Egypt, in ancient Rome, in ancient China, the story was the same. Even the wealthiest households were crowded places, servants everywhere, family members sharing rooms. The idea that a person might sleep alone was practically incomprehensible. Historian Lawrence Stone, in his monumental study The Family, Sex and Marriage in England 1500 to 1800, documented how even in the homes of English nobility in the medieval period, beds were shared. Not just by married couples, by servants, by guests, by strangers at inns. To sleep in a bed by yourself was a luxury so extreme that most people would never experience it in their lifetimes. So when did that change? Here is the most surprising twist in this entire story. The invention of privacy didn't come from a philosopher. It didn't come from a revolution. It didn't come from a great declaration of human rights. It came from corridor. In the 16th century, wealthy European architects began doing something radical in house design. They added hallways. Before this moment, rooms in a house were arranged in sequence. You walked through one room to reach the next. Every room was a thoroughfare. Your bedroom wasn't private, it was a passageway. Architectural historian Robin Evans, in his essay Figures, Doors, and Passages, traced this transformation in precise detail. Before the corridor, he wrote, Movement through a house was movement through social life. Every journey from one end of the house to another meant passing through occupied social space. The corridor changed everything, and with that single architectural change, something new entered the world. Personal space. The idea that a room and the self inside it could be yours. But privacy wasn't just about rooms. It was also about something far more intimate, your thoughts. The ancient world had very little concept of a private inner life. In ancient Greece, most intellectual and emotional life happened out loud, in conversation, in the public square, in the theater. Even the act of reading was done aloud. Classical scholar A.K. Gavrilov documented in research published in the Classical Quarterly that silent reading was so unusual in antiquity that when St. Augustine, in the 4th century A.D., observed his teacher Ambrose reading without moving his lips, he recorded it in his autobiography as something worth noting. Think about that. The interior monologue, that constant stream of private thought that runs through your mind right now, would have been a strangely unfamiliar concept to many ancient people. Their thoughts flowed outward, into community, into conversation. It was early Christian monastic culture, 14 researchers like historian Peter Brown have argued, that began to cultivate the idea of a guarded inner self, a soul that was yours alone. And when the printing press arrived in the 1450s, everything accelerated. Books meant you could now think privately, form opinions without a priest or scholar standing over you. The reading chair and the private study, the closed door. Privacy was becoming an architecture of the self. By the 18th century, something radical was happening. Privacy was no longer just an architectural luxury for the wealthy. It was becoming a political idea. Philosopher John Locke had argued that every person had a sovereign inner self, a mind and a body that no government had the right to violate. The courtroom and the state, Enlightenment thinkers argued, should not be able to reach inside your home, your letters, your mind. In 1604, English jurist Sir Edward Coke had already declared that a man's house is his castle, a legal principle that for the first time drew a boundary between the public world and private life. In 1890, barely 136 years ago, American lawyers Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis published a groundbreaking law review article simply titled "The Right to Privacy." They wrote it, reportedly, because the new technology of portable cameras was allowing journalists to photograph people without their consent. The camera, that new, invasive machine, had made privacy fragile. And so they argued, for the first time in legal history, that privacy itself was a right. They called it the right to be let alone. Sounds familiar? So you didn't just lock a door, you inherited a revolution, and somewhere in the silence, behind that door, in the stillness that most humans who ever lived never got to experience, you are living out one of the hardest won freedoms in history.